Welcome to the first episode of the Indie Spotlight podcast from the Front
We're
Row
here.
Movie Review Network, sponsored by NPR Illinois. My name is Ethan Fant, and I'm here with my co-host, Kimmy Schofield. Go ahead and say hi, Kimmy.
Hi, I'm Kimmy Schofield. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for having me, Ethan.
Yeah, can't wait to see what happens.
Me either. It's going to be a roller coaster.
Can't wait. All right. Well, today we're going to be talking about not really a movie, but is marketed as such now, but more of a taping of a live performance or several live performances.
Yes.
From a show on Broadway called In and of Itself by Derek DelGaudio. I would preface this by saying if you haven't seen it, go see it first and then listen to us talk about it, because I think Kimmy would agree that it was best taken in kind of blind, like so you don't have an idea of what it is.
Don't look for spoilers. Even if you've never heard of him before, just go and watch it.
Had you heard of him before?
No, I had not.
Neither
I
had
hadn't
I.
at all. And I had thought about looking up articles about what happened. And even after I watched it, and then I just didn't want to. I wanted to keep the experience to myself. So
yeah, I find that the hardest piece of getting people to watch it is that they want to know something about it. And like, no, you don't get to. You shouldn't know anything.
Even when
about
you
it.
described it to me, I believe you just said, watch it. It's kind of a theater thing. He's kind of a magician. He's a performer. It's a live performance. And that's what it was settled on. And that's what it is.
Yeah, that might have actually been too much information. But yes.
I don't even know what he markets himself as otherwise.
Sleight of hand artist, I believe, is how he calls himself. He was on a podcast recently with Tom Segura, a famous comedian, and that's how he called himself.
I like that.
But yeah, I hadn't heard of the show until my brother was watching Colbert, because he was a guest on Colbert, because Colbert sponsored or executive produced the taping of it so that people could see it on Hulu. Because he saw it live and was like, everyone in the world needs to see this.
Which is true.
It's true. And somehow also got Frank Oz to direct this as well. And apparently he was the director of the show and not the Hulu performance. He was like part of the stage production of it as well, which is crazy.
Which is amazing.
Yes. So initial impressions, I guess I just want to get from you initially so it can kind of frame the context of the conversation. What did you think about it? How did you feel? All that sort of stuff.
Okay. Went into it not knowing anything about it other than the brief description, which I still didn't fully embrace when you described. You told me to watch it and I was in.
Okay, great.
Initial impression when it started was that I kept expecting it to, everything in it was unexpected. I had no expectations for it, but it didn't go any route that I would have been able to guess. And I also felt like I was in a live performance of it. I cried multiple times throughout it. My roommate was watching it with me, who's also one of my best friends, and she was just not looking at me either because she was fully engaged.
She was also crying.
But then when she noticed that I was having such an emotional response to all parts of it, she also was, and she wanted to kind of keep it low. But I was completely captivated the whole time, and it brought me back to when I am on stage, which I also will have an emotional response to any live performance. But this one, I felt like he was talking directly to me the whole time, and it was just so vulnerable, and I loved it.
No, I would agree with almost all of that. I watched it alone for the first time in a dark room, kind of replicating
Probably the best
theater.
Choice for anyone who wants to watch it. Watch it alone first.
Yes, and then tell all of your friends about it and watch it with them. Yes, no, I agree. Had no expectations going in, but I could tell as soon as it started that this was like not going to be a normal sort of viewing experience, like watching a movie or any other TV shows. Definitely, in a way, almost kind of like interactive in the fact that you were constantly reflecting on your own personalities and own identities as the show was going on, and he was talking about his stories as well.
Absolutely.
I did find some of the critical reception of this to be interesting, that focused way too much on like the magic part of it.
Yes.
I was like,
I agree with you.
This is not the point of the show. And some people calling it like manipulative. I was like, how are you? I don't even know where this is coming from, but
I don't either. They said it got like too silly or something at some point.
Or they were trying to deconstruct his tricks to be like, oh, these are just parlor tricks. It's like, all right, well, you missed the point by like a mile.
Also, it
Um,
is a performance, but that doesn't mean that it's just a bunch of, can we swear on this?
um,
I was gonna
no,
say
we
BS.
can bleep it out.
No.
But
Easily not swear in this. Just thinking about some of the critical reception that, yes, they were just trying to, they took everything away. They pushed everything out the window except for this is what happened with a magic trick, which was not even the point of it.
Yeah, I think that stems from just a lack of vulnerability or allowing yourself to kind of get encompassed in the show and the message. Yeah, that'll lend you to then just try to deconstruct magic tricks, which was
well, especially if you end up feeling uncomfortable yourself and you don't want to, if you've never seen a show like that or live theater or a one-person show ever, and you're not used to people presenting themselves in that way, I think in turn it makes you uncomfortable. So you either embrace it, like I think we did, or you just reject it and try to poke holes in what happened.
I think those are the two sides of the coin here. Yeah, it was interesting to me too. Like I didn't even think like the magic was, I didn't even think it was like a magic show. Like,
no, nor did I.
Because it lended itself so well to the telling of the story and to who he was. That was like, yeah, I'm in.
Yep. I anticipated halfway through, okay, now whatever his next thing is that he does is going to turn into some sort of magic trick or something. And I don't think I would have been disappointed, but I was definitely pleased to see that just all parts of his life were just thrown into that show and he presented all of it. And I never felt distracted. I think a couple of critics said that it lent itself to risking the audience being taken away from the point of it because of tricks or gimmicks or something. And I disagree with that completely.
I think later we'll touch on what it may have felt like to be there in the moment for that, and how much that would have intensified, I think, the emotional response we both had. But let's just kind of touch on the actual like plot and themes of the show a little bit, give some context around it. The 6 barrels of the chamber representing the 6 chambers in a revolver were seen on the stage, and each one represented a part of the story and a part of his life. I did actually listen to him in that podcast I mentioned earlier, that Ruletista story. Everything about that is true. He was actually in Spain. Some stranger told him that story, and then he lost his mind.
It sounded true. And
well, that's like the whole thing. This whole show was 100% authentic, which is why it's crazy to hear people talk about like a lack of like genuine nature to the show when it is entirely true. But yeah, it's all about the story about the Ruletista is then kicks off an entire story about identity and who we are, how we're perceived, and how that can affect who we then become. Culminating in the story about the 6 blind men and the elephant, right?
Yes.
Where if people tell you you're something and no one's around to tell you that maybe you're more than that, then you will then succumb to being what people tell you you are, which I think happens probably far too often in lots of people's lives. How did you relate to that story at all in your own life and stuff like that?
Absolutely. Especially both of them. I think they're both parallel for sure. I was trying to think of the best way to describe it, but just, I mean, the amount of times that I personally have tried to put myself in boxes or categorize myself as, okay, I have this degree, so I'm going to go for this job. And then I don't. And so I feel disappointed and I feel ashamed to tell people that I'm doing something else. Or, okay, I'm a performer, but I don't have a degree. So now I don't feel like I can do it. It's just the fear of constantly not being good enough and feeling inept is something that I definitely relate to. And being stuck in those boxes, that's going to make you feel that way. And it's not going to allow you to progress or go any farther or anything. And having people shut you down, for me, I think I more so have had people support me, but in the back of my head, I still just have people telling me like that elephant, you're just an elephant. When really you're a culmination of so many different
You're a magical creature, right?
Much more. You're a magical creature. You're beautiful, you're colorful, you're a bunch of different creatures all together. And then that poor elephant just walked away and those people left. And now they have a definition of you or that elephant, and you're just left to wander away. So no matter what support you have, which I think is kind of seen in with Derek, which might come up later, it's hard to get out of your own head until you start kind of taking action with it, which I think for him, this show was obviously a big,
Yes.
big, huge
Yes.
step in the
Yes,
right
yes.
direction for him and his self-identity.
No, I agree. I think for me personally too, like I didn't really start figuring out who I was or what I wanted to do or what I liked until I was like almost like 20, like
Sure.
thinking for myself in that sort of way.
Mhm.
I had always kind of taken cues from the people in my life, family members, friends, and just kind of like fitting in where I thought I should be as opposed to like
Yeah.
what I really wanted to be. So that part I definitely understood and related to a lot. I think it's really interesting too, for those who haven't seen it, when you walk into the show or we walk into the theater, you pick a card that has one adjective or one noun that describes who you are.
Yeah.
And you're supposed to pick that, give it to the hostess when you walk in and sit down, and that's on your mind now. Like you have now self-identified the one thing that you are. So you've already kind of pigeonholed yourself with that adjective right before the show starts. So you already have that on your mind. And I think that would have kind of intensified that experience a little bit too. Because the show is like, it's holding up a mirror to who you are and who you want to be and how you see yourself, and then how you think others perceive you as well. And I think that continues to be a theme throughout the show with the letters, which is a crazy thing that happens. The book, which is like a really interesting way, like medium of storytelling as well. He did mention that they were like maybe less than a 50% success rate on good entries into that, or like
not
thoughtful
surprising
entries.
to me at all.
But for the ones that the ones that were really good was like people writing poems, people putting in pop-up stories, just like lots of crazy stuff that I thought was really cool.
Yeah, and art. And I think that when I saw everybody picking what they were going to identify themselves as, and even thinking about it now, I think that I probably would have felt overwhelmed by it, because it reminded me of if you're preparing for an interview or anything where somebody's going to ask you, tell me something about yourself, or what's the characteristic that you have that's going to make you a good candidate for XYZ. And you have to then, you don't have to, but there's pressure almost to get rid of any other options about who you could be and just be that elephant to describe that person.
Yes.
So it's so amazing that people were able to pick and choose what they wanted to be. And I know some people picked exactly what they defined themselves as, and that's great and wonderful, but the show definitely allowed them to explore during and after, probably for the rest of their life. It's not going to be something they forgot.
Right.
Who they are and what they were that night in that experience.
Yeah. And I think at the end too, when he kind of goes down the line and he tells people what they picked, it's a way of them being seen for who they want to be or who they think they are as well, which I think for some people was like an enlightening, joyous experience, and for others was like a reaffirmation of the lack of who they think they are as well. For some of the people that picked the card, I think someone picked the card nobody. And you could see like Derek's face was very somber, as was the audience members as well with that. I guess next we can touch on the magic a little bit here, because I don't know how he did any of the things he did.
Neither do I. I don't want to know.
And I don't, and I also don't care. Like I'm not
neither
here to
do
like figure it out.
You're an amazing performer, Derek. Let's keep it going.
I'm totally fine being mystified and left out of the loop, but I do think like the craziest thing to me was the sleight of hand that he was doing, because he was purposely like trying to show you what he was doing. Like he's like, look at these cards, they're right here.
Yep.
And now they're there, and I don't know how he did that. I don't know what happened.
I was amazed, and I think that was one of the few. They did a couple cuts to the audience, but the couple times when he did do the sleight of hand and they looked at the audience member, and I just remember one woman did exactly what I did, which was how just complete awe.
Yeah. And I don't know, like as an audience member in the last row, if you get a full appreciation of what was actually happening on that table. That's maybe one of the benefits of seeing it in a movie documentary sort of format, is that you get that close up of everything. But yeah, I guess for that too, that's part of like the dog and the wolf discussion for that. Did you understand him being a wolf as him like going into these like underground card games and taking people's money? Like, is that what you understood that to be?
That is what I understood it as, kind of like he was going into this dangerous lifestyle or risky lifestyle, or presenting himself as a risk taker, I guess,
Mhm.
in a way that maybe he didn't define himself as previously.
Yes.
But yeah, going into shady underground places that are reflective of like Russian roulette style.
Mhm.
And yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought it was interesting too. When he's doing the shuffling the cards before the bridge display towards the end,
Mhm.
he was saying that the shuffles were crooked so that the dealing would be fair. So he knew exactly the positioning of every card in the deck before he shuffled and as he was shuffling, which I don't even know how that's possible.
I don't either.
Yeah.
I don't either.
It's crazy. But yeah, I think that was another thing that they talked about on that podcast was another reason that people may not have allowed themselves to be completely vulnerable to the show was that they knew if he could influence them to think like this positively, like emotionally charged way, then he may be able to manipulate them the other way, the negative way, as well as the wolf and not as the dog. So they were scared of what that might look like as well. I don't know if I fully see that, but I could understand, like, if you were savvy enough to be like, oh, this guy can do both, and he might fuck with me in a way that is bad. And I just cursed. So
you'll bleep it out.
I'll bleep it out. We'll put an E next to this episode for explicit. Sorry, 17-year-olds out there, you're not gonna be able to listen to this podcast.
Yeah, I guess if you did go into it with the desire to critique it or break it down in a way, then I could see that mindset. I could still understand it. It's not what I did, but
yeah. All right. Well, this next segment of the show is one that I've invented, and we're going to try it out for the first time.
Okay. First time. There's a whole thing.
This whole thing's the first time. So stick with us. It's what I call the coffee cup test.
Okay.
This is a test of immersion, or rather the break of immersion from a show, movie, whatever. The idea is that sometimes I'll be watching a show and a character will be carrying around a coffee cup, or sometimes the carrier with 4 cups of coffee, and they'll just be gesturing wildly with this coffee cup. And we know it's empty. There's nothing in there.
Yes.
Otherwise, they'd have first-degree burns all over their bodies.
They would. There would be people slipping everywhere.
And it's just such an easy thing to fix. Just put water in the cup. Like, do something. Give it some weight. Make it real.
I feel like we didn't have this discussion, but I really feel like it must have just been bothering me for my whole life.
Something I've noticed a lot, but I've never heard anyone talk about. I'm sure people do, but it's never been brought up. And I would assume it hasn't. Otherwise, someone would have fixed it. Like, because it's not like you need to spend a lot of money to fix this problem.
I know.
And even when they drink from the coffee cup, and we can tell they're not actually drinking anything. Just like, get it together, Hollywood. All right.
Thank you.
Anyway, the test was there any sort of break of immersion for you in this show? Anything that kind of took you out for a second? Anything like that?
The only time that I actively remember that happening was probably the first time that there was a cutaway to something animated in the memory. And that was just because I didn't expect it. One of the things that I absolutely love about it, especially with one-person shows, because I've done one and have a minimalist set, and that's what I loved about this, was that there was a minimalist set, so you focused on that person on the stage right there explaining everything that was going on. And when they cut away from that and did the animated memory of the Roulettista, I initially thought, oh, what is this? Because I had forgotten that it was still a film, and because it was filmed with so many different performances, and it's still a movie, because it's really hard to film live theater and have the point come across. Especially musicals. So, but after that, I just accepted it as part of it. And I think that they did a really good job in just including it as part of the flow and the storyline. And his voice was still there doing the narration. Other than that, I personally didn't have anything that took me out of it when it came to the point of, people wanting to participate by being the storyteller, or when he was saying everybody's card that they picked. I was so emotionally invested in both of those times that I felt just utter joy that people wanted to participate in live theater, and then people wanted to get any sort of interaction they could with him, and they received it. So I was in it from that initial cutaway to the animation.
Got it.
Nothing else that I think other people have mentioned, like critics, took me out of it. Did you get taken out of it? I feel like you did.
I think that point is valid. I think it was kind of just like a little bit of a readjustment of what I was watching. And I don't think anything that broke me out of it was his fault or a fault of the show at all. I think at times I was just like trying to figure out what I just saw while things were progressing, which is like, that's on me more than anything.
That's true. There's a disclaimer at the start of it that asks you to turn off your cell phones, I think.
Well, I wasn't looking at my cell phone. I was just thinking about the past crazy thing he did. I was like, what the hell was that? Yeah. So other than that, though, there wasn't much that broke the immersion for me. I thought it was really interesting too, how many times they did like multiple cuts of like someone reading the book, someone reading the letter, because it reinforced like how crazy it was that he was able to do this on a night in, night out basis.
Every night.
Yeah, he was the Ruletista every night, which I also think people didn't quite understand that metaphor. For some of them I talked to, of at the end, some people were confused why he like put the gun to his head, why he like made all those proclamations. I was like, well, he just stood in front of a crowd and performed like death-defying acts. He was doing what the Ruletista did.
Yes.
And that's what he's doing every night.
Every night.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For 90 minutes.
For 90 minutes every night. And he said in the New York shows, which I think was 540 some shows he did in New York.
And those were because it was off Broadway, right?
Yeah, so it started in LA and then it went to New York. I don't know if it was off or on Broadway in New York. I should know that. I don't.
I'm pretty sure it's off Broadway, but that doesn't mean that it's not real and not.
No, yeah, for sure. My favorite musical of all time is an off Broadway musical. So, yeah, I think that's some people also were turned off by like how heavy-handed the ending was of him being like, I am who I am. I am more than just an elephant. I'm all these things. Like, I was like, well, I don't think I think you missed the point. Like, some people need to hear that. Like, some people need to hear that they are more than the one thing.
Absolutely.
And sometimes it can be cathartic for you to even say it out loud to others that you are more than one thing as well.
On myself. I think that's why I was so emotional after. My roommate said, oh, you're actually crying. I was like, yeah, I have.
These are tears.
I've been having some serious, like, I'm finding my identity and what I want to do. And I am relating to this man who just put himself in front of everybody and helped everybody else try to figure out who they are.
Yes. I think it's important to know that you can do that when you're 30 still. Like, you can keep doing it, and you should keep trying to discover who you are. Because if you decided that you know exactly who you are when you're 30, to me, like, you've choose to stop living your life at that point to an extent. Like, you choose to stop exploring, being curious, learning new things. You may find that some things surprise you. And in fact, they should.
They should.
So I mentioned the book earlier. There is a book out there that can be somewhat of a companion to this called A Moral Man, which discusses his dive into the somewhat darker aspects of sleight of hand and the conditions and entrapments he found with that. It's interesting, like, you see in the end all of the, like, I guess celebrity cameos. They're not really cameos, they're just attendees of the show. But one of them was like David Blaine, who I'm assuming they know each other quite well. But you see David Blaine all over the place. His face is like, he's like the face of magic, right? But you don't see Derek anywhere. Haven't for a long time.
Never had heard of him ever.
I was honestly more impressed with him than I ever have been with David Blaine, but so I'm excited to see if he ends up being more upfront with his stuff now that he has given up his life as a wolf. Well, who knows if he's given it up? I don't want to presume anything.
Other aspects as a dog.
Yes. No, this is just a long con, all of this, for something greater.
And if it is, okay.
Yes. The other thing I want to talk about was how seamless he was able to integrate magic with storytelling, with like stage sort of set design and all that sort of stuff, which was crazy.
Yes.
Like when at the end, when all of the squares drop from the wall, crazy. Like
Amazing.
Like, yeah, again, the set design with the 6 chambers of the revolver I thought was really cool. Just
It
like
was
the
so
very minimalist design with just the one desk there as well.
Mhm.
And he
Yeah, I didn't
did
even notice the desk until
until
he
you
was
sat down.
literally sitting at the
Yeah.
desk. And
Mhm.
I don't know, perhaps they do show it a couple times before, but
Yeah.
I sure didn't pay attention.
Yeah, crazy stuff. Here's a question for you. How would you have reacted had you opened up a letter from your mom sitting on that stage?
I would have probably done what that sweet woman did,
Mhm.
where she said, I don't understand. And she
Yes.
started crying because I didn't. That was also one of the moments where I thought, oh my gosh, these, because when he first asked you to pick a letter, I thought to myself, I have no idea who I would have chosen to write a letter. However, this happened in whatever way, I have no idea who would say something and I would have this sort of response. But I think that I would have, no matter who wrote whatever it was, having just the surprise
Mhm.
and then that letter being something that is loving or supportive, I would have just started crying and probably have hugged Derek immediately. And then I would be nervous that I made him uncomfortable.
Right. And now he's like, but now you have to read this to everybody. Now everyone gets to hear what you just read. Yeah, that thing was crazy. I don't understand. Still don't. I don't care really.
I don't care either. There was about 2 seconds where I thought, maybe when you bought tickets, and then I was like, nope, don't care.
He solicited multiple letters from every person in the audience. Like, I don't. Somehow
don't
he
know.
did. Don't know how.
Don't know.
Crazy. Yeah, I think I would have had. I don't know if I would have been able to read it out loud like as calmly as some of those people did.
Yeah.
I
and
do
nobody
know
had to explain anything.
No.
The one woman chose to, which was lovely. But
also, yeah, which kind of heartbreaking story there as well. But apparently not all of them were winners, he said as well. Like some people just like read it as like, oh, all right.
Okay. Yeah.
That's good. Good stuff.
Can I sit back down?
Yes. Yeah, that part was crazy. The thing at the end, I also don't understand. But also probably would have been like a very emotional experience, depending on how seriously you took it at the beginning, which I also don't know how seriously I would have took it. Right. I like to think I would have like picked something that I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna take this seriously. But some people pick ninja.
This one looks fun.
Yeah. I stand up was like, you're a ninja? That's not real. You should sit back down. Yes. The brick thing I think is the only thing that makes the most sense that could happen. Like someone says it and then like they have an hour of the show left and then someone runs out and puts the brick wherever it's supposed to go.
But the fact that the people who found it were still so excited to find it.
I mean, I would have been probably.
I would have been thrilled. And I would have left it and then looked at the next day.
Yes. Apparently he's done one other off-Broadway thing before as well. I don't know if it wasn't just him, but he's started to enter the theater more, which I think is awesome because this is like, again, a very like singular sort of experience, I think.
Absolutely.
And he did talk about too how, because at the end it takes probably like, I don't know what, 20-30 minutes to talk through everyone's identity card. He's like, are people going to sit there and just like listen to me say nouns for half an hour? It's like, yes they are.
They are.
If you've done the job well enough up to that point, you have secured enough goodwill that they will sit through anything probably at that point.
Absolutely.
Yeah. He also said that he never messed up the cards once in New York. But in LA, he messed it up a couple times, which is also crazy that he only messed it up a couple times out of like 1,000 times.
Right?
Yeah.
Can you imagine singing a song every single night and not once ever one night having something go awry, even just slightly?
Yeah. Crazy. We can either talk about this or not, depending on what you want to do. But I thought it might be interesting to give some like more personal anecdotes as to how the reflection on identity is reflective of both of our lives a little bit.
We can do that.
Sure.
I'm into that.
I guess, was there anything while you were watching it that stuck out in your mind, like specifically as to your identity and the different stuff you've been going through recently?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things was Derek himself being on stage. And one of the I don't know if he described it or it was in one of the books, the storytelling books
Mm-hmm.
that he read, that said one of the first things I noticed was Derek's sad eyes. And that was
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that I noticed too, which I know part of it was for the performance, but also he himself is admitting to his state of being and his self-identity at that point in time
Mm-hmm.
on the stage. And for me personally, the things I want to do now is be a performer, preferably theater. I
Mhm.
will do film or voiceover, but if I could do theater, that's what I would want to do
Yes.
the most. It's
Fine,
like,
if I must be in movies,
yes,
fine,
if you
whatever.
have to cast me, I guess I'll do it. But I always feel so vulnerable on the stage, but it's also where I feel the most comfortable.
Mhm.
And when I get off the stage, sometimes it's tiring, but more times than not, it's really rewarding. And I did a one-woman show 2 years ago or something, and it was about 58 minutes. And there was no set and no props or anything. And it was a really dark story.
Mhm.
And when I would get off the stage and I would see people afterward, they would ask, how do you do this every night? It's like, it's not draining. And for me, it's not. For me, it's really satisfying. And so watching Derek do that just reinforced for me that it's something that I want to do. And when he got to asking audience members to participate, it then really made me remember how much I love theater and how much these people are supporting him by being there,
Mhm.
and just made me want to do it more. And the identity part, the 6 chambers and the elephant, for absolute sure. I mean, I have currently just in a job where I don't want to be, and it's stressful, but I have accepted that I chose this job specifically. It helps people in the community, which I love, but
Mhm.
it also pays really well so that I can take the time to pay off school and my car and any bills that I want to, so that I can then actually save to take the steps to be a performer. And leading up until that point in high school, I wanted to do performance as a major in college, and I was persuaded and discouraged
Mhm.
not to do it because a lot of people who were close to me thought it was just a hobby. And then I did broadcast journalism. So I was a news anchor for a little bit of time on the radio, and that's what people define me as. And then I tended bar. So anywhere that I would go with
Mhm.
different jobs, it would be, you're the bartender from whatever, you were the radio person from whatever, you were the runner from this race. And every time I would say, yeah, that's me. When in reality, what I really wanted to do was do all these things as hobbies, but be a performer. So
Mhm.
it's taken me until, probably since I was 15, so 16 years until I finally accepted now that I can have all of those qualities and characteristics and hobbies and do those things, but it's okay that I want to do what I want to do and I want to be what I want to be. And that's going to be everything. But in the performance world, I haven't had formal training. So when I am performing, I always still to this day feel like I'm not good enough because I don't have the background. I don't have other people in my life
Mhm.
who have trained me or who have coached me or anything. When I was with my ex and we were going to go sing on cruise ships together, we were recording an audition reel, which you also did.
I also
I
did that. Yes, it's out there
vividly
somewhere.
It's
Yeah.
somewhere out there, our cruise ship audition reels. I vividly remember the whole time just thinking to myself, okay, he is the performer. He is known in town as the performer. He has done cruise contracts. I'm just along for the ride.
Mm.
And it was horribly stressful for me to record everything. I didn't recognize it at the time, but looking back on it now and seeing the recording that I did then versus what I can do now, I'm like, oh man, I was not in a good place. I was not able to define myself as anything other than something I didn't want to be. And now I'm a little past that.
Yeah.
Accepted what I want to do. So watching Derek just reminisce the dark times that he's had, and from his childhood with other people, seeing other people have a hard time, seeing him in response to that, definitely related to, and ultimately him being on stage and sharing his story as a performance was really the thing that hit home for me.
Sure. I think it's interesting how I have a hard time, like when people ask me, they tell me like I'm a singer or I'm a whatever. I'm like, am I? I don't know. Like I don't do it professionally. Like I'm not trained to do
Right?
it.
It's something I
I don't know if
can
I can
do.
identify myself as that. Like
Right.
I'm always like, yeah, I say like I'm good for like normal people. Like I sing. I don't know if I am a singer, but maybe I am. I don't know.
I don't get paid for it, so
Certainly don't. Well, so now I am a product strategist. That's a great, yeah, that's what I am.
know
Yeah.
exactly what that is.
Yeah, no, the worst. Yeah, so I think that's interesting about how we choose to identify ourselves
Mhm.
and like the labels that, for better or worse, people put on us based on how they
Yes.
perceive us and where they see us.
Yes.
It's like not their fault that they say those things.
No,
Like,
and I think that when people say to you, like
Mhm.
you're the singer, or like, yeah, that's that guy that I know from college who was in the other a cappella group,
Mhm.
or define me as the person who worked at the animal shelter. I don't think they're doing it to knock us
It's not
down,
malicious at all. No.
but in my head, I think, oh, that's
Mhm.
all I am.
Yeah.
Like,
It'd be different if
should
someone's
I
like,
just do that
you're
then?
not a singer. You should stop. Like that would be different. Yes.
That'd be so bad.
And I've had some experiences similar to yours of being discouraged from picking a
Mhm.
certain direction. I remember specifically one time, my senior year of high school, I wasn't in show choir,
Mhm.
but I was in the combo for show choir because I was at the time like a pretty good saxophone player.
Okay.
But I was also the only guy who could sing, really. I mean, there were like a couple of us,
I
but
understand.
so my choir director, I was playing in the combo for the show choir, and he was like, you know what? We need you to sing the ballad of our show,
Oh,
of the whole show.
okay.
I was like, oh, okay.
Can do it.
And so I had to do that. And then there was a solo competition as well that if you so like you'd sing a song from a show or a musical or anything like that, and then if you got selected to be in the top 3 of those who were part of the competition, you then had to perform it during the actual show choir performances.
Okay.
And I did not know that, the latter half of that, when I went into this competition, because my director told me, you're probably not going to make it anyway. I was like,
Oh no.
oh, great, cool. I was
Oh,
like, I didn't
no.
think it was going to come up. I didn't think it was going to matter. I was like, all right. So like for me, for that point, because I was so known as a saxophone player, often my singing was discounted at that point in my life as well.
Yes.
And it's a matter of just people can be more than one thing. And
Yes.
I think that I actually struggled with that a lot now. I consider myself a man of many small passions,
Yes.
which makes it hard to pick one direction to go, because there's
Agreed.
lots of directions I want to go, but I can't go in all the directions.
Yeah.
I think that's also like a result of me not really figuring out what my real passions and interests were until I was like 22, 23. And then I've just been building on those ever since.
Yeah.
Which also kind of explains my recent move from Chicago to Los Angeles
Which
to
is so
explore some of
good.
those. Yes. Soon you'll be leaving Champaign,
Yes.
Illinois as well, hopefully.
I will be there. Promise.
But yeah, I think that that's an important thing for me and for most people, I think, is just to understand that it's okay to just be where you are in life and understand that you can still explore and grow and change. And you should.
And you should. And even if you do decide that you have a specific direction that you want to go, it's okay to still do the other things that you like doing. Because I agree with you I've been doing a lot of straight plays. And then when I had a play where I sang a song, people said, oh my gosh, I didn't know that you could sing. And I thought, are you serious? Like, this is really? So it's, yeah. And again, not maliciously, although I don't know about your choir director saying that you'll never
Maybe
win.
a little bit more maliciously.
That wasn't that great. But I too had somebody tell me, well, your voice is just pretty. And I was like, oh, that's the worst thing that I've ever heard. It's not unique. It's not special. And it doesn't have to be. I can still sing if I want to, when I want to.
It's true.
And so can you. And we can also do other stuff.
We can do so many things.
Yeah. And I have friends too who are in a very self-reflective state of being. And it is, I think it's nice. I mean, I'll talk about anything all the time. So it's nice for me to have had that vulnerable experience. I think that a lot of people will go through it their whole lives, especially as they get older. The impending doom of being too old to finish whatever it is that they wanted to do, I think kind of sets in on a lot of people, but
Yeah.
it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to. And if it does, it doesn't have to stop you. So being able to talk to other people who are self-reflecting, whatever age they are and whatever state of life they are, has been, it's nice to know that you're just not the only person who feels this way.
Right. Yeah, I think that's the interesting thing about the show too. It kind of prepares the fact that people may not be immediately vulnerable, and then through the telling of his own story, attempts to disarm you, so that by the end you are allowing that experience to take place. So I think that's reflective too of the people that did not find themselves vulnerable or emotionally moved by the show, is that maybe there's a wall there. Maybe that's what that tells me a little bit. I've certainly had that wall for the majority of my life, so I understand. But I think that shows an encouragement to those who may otherwise not be vulnerable to, at least for a moment, reflect and look inward and see what they think of themselves and how they want the world to perceive them.
Yes. And Derek's, I know I said earlier I didn't really have expectations for the show, but the one thing that I did wonder throughout the show was if Derek's mood was going to shift throughout it, if this was going to be an optimistic show or a show that was just going to, just fall off and just be terribly miserable. Still good, but if it was just going to be sad. And at the end, even when he's talking about what he is more than, his own state of being doesn't really change, and he doesn't need to. I don't need him to be jumping around for joy saying that he knows a little bit more about himself than he did before, or he's shared this part of himself. He's still doing what he loves and the way that he wants to do it, and it's refreshing.
I think the only emotional shift that we really notice is at the end of just the exhaustion of, which is part of the performance too. It's part of like his whole Ruletista Gambit thing again.
Yeah,
he's put on this performance, and now
people being told who they are.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. I guess one thing that I had thought about too, like the different segments of the show and how they fit into the overall narrative. The one about his mom and the brick. How do you think that related to the story as a whole? Because it's not necessarily, it doesn't talk about his identity as much, but more like his faults in that sort of space to an extent. Like, what did you think about that part of the show and how it related to the whole theme?
I hadn't thought about it much. I definitely, when it came in, was just taken into the emotional part of the story and also kind of the struggles of what Derek experienced. But I would imagine that it would go into both, obviously his mother having to identify a specific way, but also him having to identify a specific way because he had to hide the pride of who his mother was and who she defined at least her sexuality as in his house, because he didn't want to be ashamed or lose friends or anything, which probably carried on as an insecurity, even though he fully accepted his mother and he accepted his mother's partner and he accepted friends and everything. I think that was probably one of the first times that he recognized, oh, shoot, this is something that maybe nobody else wants to have happening, and I have to deal with that. And he has to fill a certain expectation. So he tried to control it and it didn't work.
Right.
And I mean, that's completely reflective of him as an adult trying to work his way and move his way through the world as a wolf. Even now as a dog also, just finding your identity and learning to accept it and continue moving forward with it.
Yeah, I think it was like an interesting case study of the struggle with like external forces a little bit into how you deal with that as well. Because I can imagine he didn't really talk about being resentful at all, but I imagine that may have come into play at some point. I'm certainly sure that if I was losing all my friends for something that I wasn't doing, that I, for right or wrong, probably would have become resentful as well.
Yeah. Even if it was subconscious, I think it would be hard not to feel like that.
Yeah. And I think that's then, The shame is what happens after that, right? Once you realize that you've been making a horrible mistake, being resentful to someone who's just trying to live their life. I think that's an interesting anecdote to place into a show that all about identity as well.
And I really like that the brick was spray painted gold. Whether or not that was significant, he took something that was completely destructive and made it shiny and golden and put it places to let new people find new joy in it. And I really liked that.
And then somehow made it disappear.
I know.
So
I know.
just another ridiculous magical thing that happened. Yeah.
So amazing.
Crazy stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, because it was part of his chambers.
Yeah, no, it was in the window.
Yeah, which means that it was significant to him, but I agree with you. It
was the only thing that didn't directly deal with like an identity crisis at Belts, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
He also did mention too, like, so on that wall, all those cards that had the nouns on them, and he doesn't look at the stack of cards that are picked. So some people thought maybe he narrowed down and then was able to say it at the end. No, he didn't know which ones were picked or which ones weren't.
He didn't.
So it's just absolutely insane.
It's so amazing.
So I think it's safe to say we both have raving reviews for.
We do.
Yes, we both loved it. We highly recommend that even if you watched it once, and hopefully you have before listening to this, that you go and watch it again, as I'm sure Kimmy will do now as well. There's so much
I will
to glean
and
learn from.
Even if you are not a performer or into art in any form, it's still worth it if you're a human and you can watch things.
Yes.
Go for it.
Yes. I mean, it's an exercise of vulnerability and empathy, and just self-reflection, which is useful for everyone.
For everyone,
yes.
At all times.
Well, I think we can kind of wrap up the segment on In and of Itself. I think to end it out, I just want to maybe give some recommendations to people of different things we've been reading, watching, listening, doing whatever.
Good idea.
Do you have anything, a book, TV, movie that you've seen, watched, you recommend for people to take a gander at?
I have a lot of things.
All right, let's narrow it down to 3.
I was gonna say 2.
Okay, 2's fine too. Let's do 2.
I could check. Yeah. Okay, we'll do 2. I'm very into dramas, but I also love comedies.
Sure.
So, but they're dark. They're always dark.
Okay.
For books, which this has probably been popularized to many other people, but I would definitely recommend, especially given the state of the world now, I think White Fragility is really good. And I think for me, it was not difficult to get through, but it goes into a lot of self-identity for whatever race you are, however you identify. The author I actually wrote to, which I don't do, but I wrote to in response to the book about what I thought about it and kind of thanked her.
And the author's name is? Just for our listeners' sake, I can do a quick
I'll have to do a quick little search because I don't remember it.
Robin DiAngelo.
Yes, Robin DiAngelo. Yes. But it's great. It's pretty short.
Yes,
but
I have a copy over there.
Have you read it?
I've started.
Okay. I recommend it. And the film that I really loved, the most recent, it was a show actually. We'll go with.
Was it In and of Itself?
Yes, it was. It was great. And here's a book that you should read: Normal People, or and or Fleabag.
Both fantastic.
Both are adult only, though.
Yes. Well, Normal People more so than Fleabag, I would say. But yes, both.
Yes.
Fleabag There's more explicit content in Normal People than there is in Fleabag.
Yes, there is. But I think both are wonderful, and you can take them both as just entertainment. But I think they're both beautiful, especially Normal People. And there are some very relatable things, but also a lot of good lessons that you can see just about general human interaction in both of them. And
yes,
I like that a lot. I like when people share vulnerability and You don't have to learn a lesson from every single thing that you read, but
No, not all art needs to be challenging, but it is. I find it refreshing when it is.
yes, I agree.
And Normal People, somewhat of a natural extension of the conversation we just had. Very much a show about identity and figuring out one's place in the world.
Also only one season.
It is only one season for now. Who knows what may happen? But it is also based off a book, I'm fairly certain, which I have not read.
I've not read either.
So Normal People, check it out. Hulu, same place you can find in and of itself. Fleabag, you can find on Amazon. Great show. I also fully endorse that.
She's amazing. Phoebe's amazing.
She's fantastic.
Genius.
And I think that show is done. I think she's done with Fleabag now.
And there's only 2 seasons, and
they're short. Yeah, super short. Yeah, well, I don't want to give spoilers to Fleabag.
No, don't.
TV show for me, one that I have been consistently recommending during the pandemic, is Ted Lasso on Apple TV.
You did recommend that to me. I don't have Apple TV, but I bet I could figure it out.
So good. It is not a dark comedy. It is a heartfelt, light, joyous comedy, and something that is so refreshing, especially in the hell we've had for the last year or so.
Yes.
For a movie, One Night in Miami, on Amazon. It is a fictional telling of an event that did not happen in history, but it is Jim Brown, Malcolm X, Sam Cooke, and Muhammad Ali all have a night together in Miami. And it's essentially a giant dialogue between the 4 of them, being 4 major voices of the Black community at the time, and a fictionalized version of what that conversation would look like.
That sounds amazing.
Directed by Regina King. Yes. Her directorial debut, and she does quite a fine job at it as well. Leslie Odom Jr. Is in it as well. He plays Sam Cooke, does a couple renditions of his tunes, does like a pretty good job, which is hard to do because Sam Cooke was pretty amazing.
Yes.
And the actor who plays Malcolm X, I've seen in a couple of other things. He was in High Fidelity on Hulu. He was really good in that. And he was in Love Life on HBO as well. He's one of my new up and coming actors to keep an eye on.
Oh, perfect.
He is really, really, really good in that movie. So if you haven't seen it, check it out.
I will.
Not just
even
you,
have
Kimmy, but the audience as well.
Suggestions, which are great. I said you have lighter-hearted suggestions, which are excellent. And I
like digging myself into a hole of despair as much as anybody, but every now and again, having a ray of sunshine come hit me while I'm down there is welcome. I know. Well.
I watched The Good Place during the pandemic because
there you go.
It just brought some light.
How about that ending though? Am I right?
Oh man, how about those tears that I cried?
So many tears. Yeah, that'll happen.
Right.
Well, I think we got it done. I think we successfully talked about a thing for like
we talked about
an
stuff.
Hour. Yeah.
I hope I didn't go on too many tangents, but I guess we'll find out.
No, the tangents are good. I think with this podcast, I want it to be a personal exploration as well, and not just reviews of movies.
Well, good. You guys will be introduced to much more of our lives and people in our lives than later.
Yes. And not that it's super important, but I do think when you were talking about white fragility, that our races also influence the context of the way. I am a white male from a rural town. You are not completely white.
Racial.
Yes.
I'm Black. Don't know where the Black's from, but I'm white as Irish. And I grew up in predominantly white area. So it's been an adventure. Moving down to Cornfield area actually brought more culture into my life than the suburb from where I originated.
Which is insane. I can't wait for you to experience something bigger as well.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I don't resent or regret anything. I do wish that I could explore and learned a lot more a lot earlier.
Yes. I think that's interesting too. I talk about this a lot with some of my friends of the paths that I've taken, and to may seem useless. Like I'm about to have 3 degrees in business, and I'm not wholeheartedly pursuing a career in business. However, it's gotten me to where I am. And I'm pretty okay with that, right?
Yes,
like I don't know how else I would have gotten here. So yes, I think not all paths lead to your ultimate goal, but they can certainly help you along the way, regardless.
Yeah. Agreed. That's a
All
good
right.
end thought there.
Well, again, my name is Ethan Fantz, and
I'm
joined
Kimmy
by,
Schofield.
yes, my co-host, and we appreciate you taking the time to hang out with us for an hour, and we'll be back sometime with another episode of something else, and it'll be great.
Until next time.
Until next time. All right, thanks, guys.